Nikola Tesla. Induction at Pittsburgh, 1889. He also realized that the invention was too important, and he believed that eventually a solution would be found. No one knows for sure exactly what happened, but it appears that Westinghouse made a tacit commitment to Tesla that he would get the company to resume work on the motor if Tesla removed the $2.5 per watt royalty clause in the contract.
If the motor came on the market and the polyphase system was adopted, the yearly figure cited above as payments against royalties worth approximately to $5,500 would be honored instead. Tesla was aware of the historical importance of his invention. He realized that it would alter the world beneficially in measurable ways. His motor, for instance, would provide an inexpensive replacement for potentially hundreds of thousands of hours of manual labor. At the same time, his creation would carve his name deep into the history books, alongside such heroes as Archimedes and Faraday. Moreover, he knew that his system was the most efficient, that it was fundamental, and that, if adopted, it would prevail.
He also wanted very much to resume his preferred path of pioneer inventor.
Tesla was not counting out debits and credits on a balance sheet. Rather, he viewed his partnership with Westinghouse in a more flexible way.
He was also negotiating in good faith and assumed that if lightened the potential financial burden, the company would somehow reciprocate. By offering goodwill, he was hoping to reap what he had sown.
Speaking of Westinghouse many years later, Tesla said, "George Westinghouse was, in my opinion, the only man on the globe who could take my alternating current system under the circumstances then existing and win the battle against prejudice and money power. He was a pioneer of imposing stature and one of the world's noblemen."
This, however, was a public statement. His private feelings were more complex.
It is clear from reading through decades of letters to the corporation that Tesla maintained a close relationship with Westinghouse.
Yet often there were undercurrents of resentment, due mainly to lack of appreciation by the Westinghouse concern of Tesla's sacrifice and continuing contribution to the company.
Tesla was also upset because the full scope of his patents became simplified, and implications arose to suggest that he merely invented an induction motor and not an entire power system.
Finally, after nearly 2 years of inactivity, the Westinghouse people resumed their efforts to make the Tesla motor practicable.
In 1891, Benjamin Lamy, a portly, easygoing, but studious youngster, began to re-examine Tesla's patents and Tesla and Scott's experimental motors.
After conversing with Tesla in New York and talking over the matter with Scott, Lamy approached his overseers with a plan to resume work on the motor.
Lamy realized that Tesla had exhausted all the possibilities of trying to adapt his motor to the higher frequencies, and that he was forced to return to the low frequencies, insisting on the superiority of his polyphase system. This idea, as stated above, was rejected most likely by Schallenberger and Stilwell.
Lamy, as the junior engineer, had to proceed carefully. With Scott's aid, he finally obtained permission to take up the work on his own, although there is little doubt that a number of officials opposed the idea. By this time, the 60-cycle system was coming in quite rapidly, Lamy said, so he suggested this frequency to the staff.
Schallenberger lost his temper and talked some plain language to me. No doubt he said that there would be no possible way that they would utilize the lower frequencies. This looked pretty serious to me, who as our mayor boy in the test room, had got into a row with the chief technical authority of the company.
I explained my situation to Mr. Schmidt, who simply laughed about it.
However, somewhat to my surprise, Mr. Schallenberger always took my part thereafter. This, of course, gave me a larger idea of the man himself, and I have always looked back with the greatest pleasure to my acquaintanceship with such a man.
What happened, most likely, is that Schmidt, along with Scott, went behind the scenes and explained to Schallenberger that here was their opportunity to finally make use of the motor without giving any more credit to Tesla. They would simply let it be known that a new and brilliant engineer working at the company had discovered the efficiencies of lower frequencies, and so the credit would go to Lamy.
No wonder Schmidt laughed about it. With a way out, Schallenberger reversed himself and patted Lamy on the back, Lamy somewhat naively concluding that he built the first induction motor, which bears any close example to the modern time. I also designed the great generators for Niagara, which were without precedent.
They were marvels of engineering achievement, having rediscovered what Tesla had suggested all along. Lamy often made it seem as though he were the originator of the idea. Uneducated readers, left with incomplete source materials, of which there are many, were forced to conclude that when it comes to the AC polyphase system, It was that versatile genius B&G Lamy who was the pillar of the Westinghouse company who made it possible.
But people who read Scott carefully knew the truth. Strenuous efforts to adapt the Tesla motor to the prevailing circuit were in vain. The little motor insisted in getting what it wanted, and the mountain came to Mohammed. End of part 3.
Nikola Tesla.
Induction at Pittsburgh.